People think building a basketball super team is simple. Just stack stars, put elite names on the same jersey, and the rest should take care of itself. But that is the biggest lie in modern basketball. A super team does not collapse because the opponent is too strong. It collapses because the egos, habits, instincts, and identities inside the team are too powerful to coexist without sacrifice. That is the real war. Not talent versus talent. Not offense versus defense. But discipline versus instinct. And what we are watching with Team USA is not some cheap internet soap opera about jealousy, bitterness, or locker room tension. No. What we are witnessing is something far more serious and far more revealing. We are seeing a team overloaded with brilliance, yet repeatedly sabotaged by one of the oldest truths in basketball. If the ball is not in the right hands at the right time, greatness becomes chaos. That is the heart of this entire breakdown. Because when you put multiple stars together, you are not asking them to prove how talented they are. You are asking them to prove how obedient they can be to the correct basketball hierarchy. And that is where everything starts to fracture. Every one of these players comes from a world where they are the center of gravity, the face of the system, the engine that everything runs through. They are used to dictating tempo, commanding touches, bending defenses, and being rewarded for taking over. But when you put on a Team USA jersey, the game becomes brutally unforgiving. Suddenly, being great is not enough. Suddenly, the question is not what can you do, but what should you do? That difference destroys more super teams than talent ever could. And nowhere is that conflict more obvious than in the transition offense dynamic between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. Because this is not about personalities. This is about offensive geometry. This is about tempo, spacing, decision speed, floor balance, rim pressure, and the brutal mathematics of advantage creation. Angel Reese is a monster competitor, an elite rebounder, a physically punishing interior presence, and one of the fiercest energy players in the game. She has every reason to trust her own force. She grabs boards like she is ripping possessions out of the air with pure violence. She plays with edge, hunger, and undeniable impact. But international basketball punishes even the smallest delay in decision-making, and that is where this entire issue explodes. Because the moment Reese secures a rebound, the next decision is not about what feels empowering. It is about what is most devastating to the defense. And the answer is simple, ruthless, and non-negotiable. The ball has to find Caitlin Clark immediately. Not eventually. Not after a couple dribbles. Not after the lane starts to close. Immediately. Because Caitlin Clark is not just another point guard asking for the outlet. She is not some standard initiator waiting to bring the ball up the floor. She is a tactical emergency the second she touches the ball in transition. She is the kind of offensive force that changes the geometry of the court before she even crosses half court. Her range is not normal. Her pace manipulation is not normal. Her processing speed is not normal. Her hit-ahead vision is not normal. She does not simply advance possessions, she detonates them. And that is exactly why every second the ball stays away from her in transition is a second the defense is allowed to breathe, organize, recover, and survive. That is the crime. That is the waste. That is the self-inflicted wound Team USA keeps reopening. Because when Reese grabs the rebound and chooses to shield, pivot, and push the ball herself, it may look modern, versatile, and even flashy on the surface. It may resemble the grab-and-go evolution we have seen from elite frontcourt creators in the modern game. It may feel like empowerment. But in this specific context, on this specific roster, with this specific point guard available, it is not evolution. It is inefficiency dressed up as freedom. The fastest way to move a basketball has always been the pass, and the smartest way to weaponize a transition possession is to put it in the hands of the player who can create panic with the fewest dribbles. That player is Caitlin Clark by a mile. The moment she receives the outlet, the entire defense enters crisis mode. Defenders have to pick her up absurdly high because if they don't, She can rise from deep and bury a transition 3 before the possession even forms. That one thread alone stretches the floor like a rack, opening seams that most teams never get to see. Lanes widen. Help defenders hesitate. Rim protectors freeze between contesting the ball and tagging the runner. Wings lose track of assignments. Bigs get caught in no man's land. The defense becomes terrified, and terrified defenses make losing decisions. That is what elite point guard gravity does. It doesn't just create shots. It creates fear. And fear creates mistakes. But when the ball stays in the hands of a front court player trying to improvise the break, that fear disappears. The defense can retreat in order. They can build the wall. They can load to the paint. They can point, communicate, switch, and absorb the possession instead of being ripped apart by it. The geometry compresses. The spacing dies. The speed advantage vanishes. And suddenly, what should have been a lethal transition opportunity turns into a clogged half-transition mess where everybody is half a beat late and nobody is operating in rhythm. That is exactly how offensive fouls happen. That is exactly how lane runners arrive too early or too late. That is exactly how great athletes are reduced to awkward, low-efficiency possessions. Because timing is not a small detail in transition offense. Timing is the entire possession. If the ball reaches Clark early, she sees the whole floor like a chessboard before the defense can place its pieces. She can fire a hit-ahead pass on a rope to a rim runner before the weak side help even realizes the danger. She can freeze the backpedaling defender with her eyes and sling a pocket pass into open space. She can drag 2 defenders with her shooting gravity and create a 4-on-3 before the opponent is even set. She can weaponize not just her passing, but the fear of her scoring. That is what makes her so uniquely destructive. And the tragic irony is that Angel Reese should be one of the biggest beneficiaries of that destruction. Reese should be feasting in this ecosystem. She should be sprinting the floor like a freight train, sealing deep, diving hard, catching on the move, finishing through contact, and collecting easy points while defenses panic over Clark. This should be basketball heaven for her. This should be one of the most terrifying guard-big combinations in the sport. Because their skill sets do not naturally clash, they actually fit together with frightening precision when used correctly. Clark is the detonator. Reese is the wrecking ball. Clark bends the defense. Reese punishes the bend. Clark creates numerical advantage. Reese cashes it in with force. Clark turns chaos into structure. Reese turns structure into violence at the rim. That pairing should be devastating. It should be elegant. It should be automatic. But only if both players are operating inside the hierarchy that maximizes each other instead of blurring their responsibilities in the name of versatility. And that is the difference between a collection of stars and a real championship machine. A machine does not care about whose turn it is to feel important. A machine only cares about what creates the cleanest kill. That is why this is not a small issue. It is not a social media overreaction. It is not people reading too much into a few possessions. It is the kind of repeated tactical misalignment that can quietly rob a team of its full offensive ceiling without the casual audience even realizing why things feel clunky. People will say, they just looked off. The chemistry wasn't there. Something felt weird. But chemistry is not magic. Chemistry is often just repeated obedience to the right reads. And right now, too often, Team USA is choosing instinct over optimal structure. Too often, they are making the game harder than it needs to be. Too often, they are ignoring the most obvious advantage on the floor because modern basketball has seduced too many players into believing every skill should be expressed at every moment. But championship basketball is not about expressing every skill. It is about weaponizing the correct skill at the correct time with zero hesitation. That is why this matters. That is why it keeps showing up.